On this episode of Keep or Sell, we'll be looking at the Zelos Swordfish Meteorite in stainless steel. We're going to weigh up the pros and cons of the watch and see if this one is a keeper or one that needs to make its way onto eBay to find a new home. Zelos have always been an interesting proposition for me. They've got a futuristic, bulky and angular design language to a lot of their models and aren't afraid to experiment with colour and materials. A few things have always put me off purchasing a Zelos in the past though. That bulky element is one big factor. A lot of the models they make are simply too big for me, and given current events in the world, wearing something with a giant Z on it for a logo is at best unfortunate. The other thing that's been putting me off for a while now is how difficult it is to actually get hold of one. If you've ever looked at the Zelos website, you'll understand what I mean. The shop site feels a little bit like browsing at an undertaker's. It's a pretty depressing experience. The site is slick, well maintained, the watches on offer are becoming more and more diverse and refined, there's starting to be something for everyone, so a lot of positives. The reason it's depressing is that most of the models are sold out. It's an e-commerce website with very little that's actually available to buy. I'm sure that isn't a problem the company worries about, it speaks to the popularity of the brand itself. As a consumer though, it's never nice to find something you want just to find out you can't actually have it. With those considerations in mind, I went shopping on the second-hand market. This has a few benefits. Not only are the watches there actually available, some are below recommended retail price, in excellent condition, and if you're careful with your search location, already have the import tax paid on them. In fact, the exact watch you see here was an ex-review model. If you look carefully at the dial, which is unique given the material, you can work out which website it featured on. I specifically avoided reading that review to avoid the danger of any plagiarism, but it is from a well-respected site that you'll find quite easily with a search for this watch. What attracted me to the watch was quite obviously that dial. It adds an extra $100 compared to the regular Swordfish models if you are able to buy direct, but that is a comparatively tiny price to pay for any watch with a Meteorite dial, let alone one with an automatic movement and the attention to detail in the finishing that you see here in the Swordfish. Zelos themselves don't give the exact details on the sourcing of the Meteorite used in these dials, but given how often they use this material across their ranges, I think it's safe to say it all likely comes from the same rock. Each dial is a razor thin slice of the Meteorite itself, which means the striations and patterning are unique. Every dial is different. When it comes to evaluating Meteorite as a material to use in a dial, I think distance is a key factor. If someone sees the watch dial from a distance, they're going to think it's grey or metallic. But when you check the time up close, the texture, depth and range of coloration is really impressive. So, in that sense, as a material, it's more of a personal treat to you than something flashy that others will notice. Not only that, but you're carrying a piece of history with you, something has travelled through space for billions of years. Who knows exactly where it's been and where it's come from? It's a little bit of wonder in your daily life, a small reminder of the realities of the life we lead and the enormities of the universe around us that can break you out of the daily working grind. If you've watched some of my other videos, you might have seen me waxing lyrically in a similar fashion over the silver lacquer dial of my Citizen. The difference here is that it isn't imitating the surface of another planet, it might actually have been past a few. Now that futuristic, angular and bulky design language might not appeal to everyone, and if I'm honest, at times I count myself amongst that number. The watch is a bit too top heavy and far more slab-sided than I would normally go for. In terms of sizing, it isn't a patch on the Trident from Christopher Ward in my opinion, and the use of colour isn't as polished and refined as you'll find in some Zodiac dive models. Having said that, this isn't Swiss made, so it comes in at a fraction of the cost, even when considering that we are talking about the cheaper end of the watch market here. My advice would generally be that not all divers are made equal. The bulkiness that's here in the Swordfish is because it's a 200 meter rated diver, and the deeper rated a dive watch is, the bulkier it naturally becomes. It's 12mm thick, largely because it needs to be to achieve that rating. As for the angularity of the watch, it has actually really grown on me, mainly because it stands out from the rest of my collection. Variety is the spice of life, as they say, and if you're building a larger collection of watches, don't be afraid to go outside of your comfort zone. You might find pieces that work for you in ways that standard and more traditional designs simply can't. If the design language of the Swordfish is something that you enjoy, believe me, Zelos is a good place to start when it comes to out there designs. Models like the Hammerhead and Starfighter take the style to another level. They're definitely not for me, but I'm sure people with larger wrists appreciate being catered to with more sizable models like this. If Meteorite appeals to you, but the form factor of the Swordfish does not, there are a few other lower budget options available that you might consider, some from Zelos themselves. Now, for context, we're not exactly talking cheap here, just comparatively compared to big brands when they use Meteorite on the dial. At the higher end of that budget range sits the Formex Essence Space Rock. It's something that's really caught my eye. I've always liked the look of the Essence range, but the 43mm size always immediately put me off. It wasn't until seeing the Space Rock and the Malachite releases that I realised they also make a 39mm version. Definitely food for thought for me for the future. Last year I featured my Zodiac Super Seawolf on the channel, and the Meteorite dial variant is a restrained but very aesthetically pleasing version. Slightly cheaper, Zelos have models like the Spearfish GMT and Aurora Moonphase. Below that there are some Selton models featuring Meteorite. I'm no expert with that brand, but I've seen a few favourable reviews on YouTube. If you're really shopping at the cheapest end of the market though, you will inevitably find your way back to the Swordfish. Any cheaper and you're in the realms of brands you haven't heard of from AliExpress. And while I'm not against Ali watches entirely, it's certainly not where I would be shopping for materials like this. Given the budget price, it doesn't come as a surprise that the movement is a Seiko NH35, albeit one with a custom date wheel. It's a reliable movement, but it isn't a particularly impressive one. Not that you'll be seeing it in a 200-meter dive watch like this anyway. The other element that really does stand out here is the strength of the loom. This is something else that Zelos prides itself on. The angular design means you get a lot of loomed surface area for the C3 Super Luminova, and the blue tone really matches well with the futuristic aesthetics in my opinion. Zelos itself was founded in 2014 by El Shantang, and they are a relatively rare success story of a one-man watch brand, at least in their inception. The watches are primarily made in China and Hong Kong, with quality control in Singapore before shipping. That quality control is really one element that sets the brand apart from its competitors in the Far East. I spent an hour scouring the internet trying to find negative reviews of the watches or the brand, and genuinely struggled. There's a level of care here that you don't always get. I think that's somewhat reflected in the packaging too. The watch comes in a bespoke travel case, something that's proved very useful to me and feels like a high quality item in and of itself. As soon as you see it, you get the impression this was made with care and they want you to care about it. One thing I've found with starting a YouTube channel is that when I buy something new, I wear it a lot, but then if I make another purchase, it naturally falls out of favour as I'm trying to plan a video and shoot footage with something else. Gone are the days when I look at my watch box and try and match my mood or my wardrobe. That's one of the reasons why I really like putting together short animations for each watch. It gives me time to look at it again in a lot of detail and see how I really feel about each one. If I'm honest, I don't think I'd be keeping this watch if it was just a regular Swordfish. It wouldn't do enough to stand out in my collection and couldn't stand up to the specifications or measurements of some of the other divers that I own. I think you can probably tell where I'm going with this. I absolutely love the Meteorite dial. Maybe one day, if I get another Meteorite dial watch, this one could go to another home, but for now, it's absolutely staying in the collection. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Would this be a keeper for you? Apologies for some of the audio in this recording. I'm still coughing non-stop at the moment, and this was the best edit I could get. A little choppier than I'd like though. As ever, thank you for your time, and if you haven't hated what you've seen, I'd really appreciate a like and a subscription if you want to see more.